Story now. Nigeria's ruling All Progressive Congress candidate Bola Tinubu has won the country's presidential vote. The Independent National Electoral Commission announced Tinubu won 8.8 million votes against 6.9 million for opposition People's Democratic Party candidate Atiku Abubakar. The Labour Party's Peter Obiah won 6.1 million votes. This was Africa's biggest democratic exercise.
Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected.
All right, let's discuss the latest developments there with the University of Pretoria's Professor Chris Isike. He's Professor of African Politics and International Relations and Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States. Professor, good morning and thank you very much for your time. So the ruling party's Bola Tinubu has been declared the winner of the presidential election in Africa's biggest economy. Your reaction? Professor, can you please unmute yourself?
Sorry about that. Thank you for having me. Yes, we had the results, and that's the headline news now coming from Nigeria. My reaction is that it's a tale of contradictions. I'm not so sure if I'm to say it bodes well, because the elections has been a tale of contradictions. It's one that shows the resilience of the people of Nigeria. So in that regard, it's a win for them because some of the results kind of reflected their will. But the elections were flawed in terms of how they were managed. It was not smooth. It was not transparent. All the legal prescriptions were not followed in terms of how results were, uploaded or collated and announced eventually. So these flaws have tended to compromise the elections in ways that will probably make the losers to question it, and they have actually done so already. I have a feeling that this is a temporary victory.
Let's hope it's only just something that will possibly, if challenged, only challenged in the courts, and we don't see some sort of revolt on the ground, because we know how that unfortunately always ends. But you are not the only one. Joyce Banda was also among those that said the elections failed to meet the standards purely because, at least for her, it was the late start, the opening of certain polling stations, quite a lot of chaos, she said.
Yes, so the election management, some of the factors, it was the delayed polls, like former President Joyce Banda noted. There was also the poor management of election, materials. There were polling units where candidates, especially of the Labour Party, were clearly missing on the ballot papers. Then there was the malfunctioning of the, Beavers machine, which many people put hope on. Actually, the electoral management body, the INEC, touted as, the game changer. It malfunctioned in terms of recognizing people. And then when it came to, uploading the results, because it was also supposed to be a medium for, uploading results in real time, to the INEC server in Abuja. That did not happen, especially for the presidential candidate. So that was a problem that led to, questioning the outcomes. And then the poor communication management also was an issue, because when that failed, there was silence for hours until the next day on Sunday. That's when they came out to say that they had, technical glitches, the nature of which have not been fully yet. So these are mismanagement problems, that kind of compromise the integrity of the electoral process.
If we had to put the technical glitches aside and just look at the candidates, both Tinubu and Abubakar are in their 70s and part of the political elite, or old guard, if you will, unlike Obiah, who was popular with the youth and seemed likely to honestly take it if we were to gauge by just what was happening on social media. So if the outcome were free and fair, as some say, particularly the winner, what does this outcome say, though, about Nigeria's voters? Are they still more comfortable with what is familiar to them?
Yeah, so one of the contradictions in this election is that, first and foremost, it was the first time in the history of the country that it had, so many registered voters, 93 million. And then the second record it broke was that out of that 93 registered million voters, 87 million collected their voters card, which is an indication of interest to vote. And if you look at how the kind of interest that Obi generated, you would expect that there would have been a high turnout, the threat of violence here and there notwithstanding. But it turns out that this same election that generated so much interest has recorded the lowest number of voter turnout on the day, 24%, as against the 37%. But and this is where the contradiction of the Beavers machine comes in. The Beavers machine has helped this process to actually, reduce vote padding and excessive vote rigging. So if you consider that in the past, certain states that had 7 million voters, had 6 million, 7 million registered voters, then 6 million votes were posted. In those same states, in this election this time, you are having about 1 million votes being posted. So you see, it means that all the previous elections where you had 6 million declared from particular state, whereas if you compare to now, what you find is that those additional millions were just added to the list. Now, the good thing is that the Beavers helped with preventing that kind of excessive voting because people had to be recognized by the Beavers machine to prevent multiple voting. But where the Beavers, the same Beavers that were supposed to be helping to make the elections credible, then failed, was that it failed to, the INEC body failed to use that same Beavers as was stipulated by the electoral law to upload the results in real time. That would have given trust, that would have been shown transparency so that whatever people were seeing on the portal of the INEC as the results were being fed in would have been clear. There would have been no issue of anybody contending the elections because the results would have been clear for everyone to see. So the thinking now, is still an allegation, is that during a 12-hour period between when the Beavers machines couldn't load results to when they resumed the following day to now start announcing results, a lot of things happened. There was tampering, there was doctoring, and that's what I believe the opposition parties are looking at and trying to gather information to prove in court. So
then, Professor,
that for me...
apologies for interjecting there. Then what of those who go on to say that Obia's popularity on social media should then be a lesson to many, that in many democracies we're seeing that the popularity on social media doesn't necessarily translate into votes on the ground, where there's some psychological disconnect here, where you have people resonating with your message, but when it's time to actually put that X, they then go with what is familiar, even if it doesn't even serve them?
No, I don't agree with you. In fact, to the contrary, there is a correlation between the social media and electoral outcomes. It has shown, all over the world, starting with the connection between digitalization, social media, and politics. We saw how social media helped get Barack Obama elected in 2008 and in 2012. Social media he used to change the electoral demography of the United States, okay? Bring it back to Africa. It's the same social media that got Hichilema elected in Zambia, same social media that got Ruto elected in Kenya. So the connection is that it galvanizes interest. The issues are brought to the fore. It's a new space for mobilization, which actually then translates to outcomes on the ground. In terms of the Nigerian election, you will see that there were 10 million people within the last 1 month of, appeal for people to come collect their voters card. There were 10 million new registered voters, and then additional 20 million that collected their PVCs. That was historical in the case of Nigeria. And all of this interest, all of this came from the interest that was generated by the candidacy of the Labour Party. And he got that through the social media. So, and if you look at the results, interestingly, even these results that they declared, doctored as they seem to be, they still reflect shocks that took power from the existing establishment. So there are lessons to show that there is indeed, connections between social media presence and outcomes on the ground. Because, for example, the Labour Party candidate, Peter Obi, defeated Tinubu in his Lagos state, which for the past 23 years had been his stronghold. He had never lost there.
Mm-hmm. So meaning you're saying there's something else on the ground. There could have been a third force here. It has nothing to do with trying to connect the dots insofar as social media interaction is concerned. Then to what Tinubu inherits, what I know some scholars term the Nigerian paradox. It's the largest economy on the continent. It has the largest oil reserves, but citizens migrate in large numbers, and some of those that are still back home also plead poverty. Which one is it? Is it corruption or wealth that is centralized? It's in the hands of the few. Talk to us about this conundrum.
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. For me, my analysis of it is that the idea of the state, and this is not just Nigeria, the state in Africa is still is foreign. We inherited the idea of the state with a wrong understanding of what the state is supposed to be about, and that's wrong perception of the state and what its purpose has also produced, a wrong understanding, a wrong notion of governance as self-service rather than service to the people. So you find that the states can be rich in terms of human and material resources, but because of the wrong understanding of governance and state, corruption creeps in, self-aggrandizement creeps in, and they are not able to produce the right kind of leadership, the right kind of development mentality and attitude that can transform the state from being a developing to a much more developed state. So that's the kind of contradiction you see in Nigeria. And unfortunately, in my view, the candidate of the ruling party is not going to be any much more different, from the last 8 years where we had the President Buhari of the same age with him, who had spent almost the first 4 or 5 years of his tenure visiting hospitals in London. It is a conundrum, like you said, that it's a country so rich in resources, but has not been able to build a hospital that can treat its own president. That's an indictment, even on the current the one who is acclaimed to have won the election, who built Lagos State, developed Lagos State in terms of infrastructure, but could not build one hospital that can treat him. That's an indictment.
Professor, thank you very much for your time this morning. That was University of Pretoria's Professor Chris Isike.